The signature on the Baxter Pharmaceuticals employment contract was still drying when my phone buzzed for the 47th time that morning. Douglas Brennan again. I silenced it without looking, slid the signed papers across the polished conference table, and shook hands with my new employer. "Welcome aboard, Garrett," said Victoria Chen, Baxter's CEO. She was everything Douglas wasn't. Sharp, direct, and genuinely interested in expertise over politics. "Your reputation in this industry precedes you. We've been trying to recruit you for 3 years." "I know," I replied. "I wasn't ready to leave before. Now I am." "What changed?" she asked with genuine curiosity. "I spent 22 years building something at Meridian. Last week they handed it to a 28-year-old with an MBA and 0 pharmaceutical experience because his uncle runs the company." Victoria nodded slowly. "Their loss. Literally." "When can you start?" My phone buzzed again. "Douglas." I declined the call without breaking eye contact. 2 weeks. "I'm giving proper notice, even to people who don't deserve it. My name is Garrett Mitchell. I'm 48 years old, and I just made the decision that would destroy Meridian Pharmaceuticals more completely than any FDA violation ever could." The story really begins 22 years earlier, fresh out of 6 years Navy service aboard the USS Carl Vinson. Machinist's mate experience taught me that precision prevents catastrophe. In pharmaceutical manufacturing, that lesson applies daily. Meridian was chaos when I started. Previous QC manager resigned after an FDA warning letter, left nothing fixed. I spent 3 months working 16-hour days, rebuilding procedures from scratch. By year 2, 0 compliance observations. By year 5, other companies called me for regulatory advice. But here's what made those 22 years different from just doing a job well. I built relationships. Not networking, not schmoozing. Real professional relationships based on mutual respect and competence. Inspector Victor Lansing at FDA knew he could trust my documentation because I'd never once lied to him or hidden a problem. When his father had a stroke, I sent flowers. When his daughter graduated pharmacy school, I wrote her residency recommendation. That trust took a decade to build. More importantly, I built relationships with clients. Granite Medical Supply was our biggest customer, $15 million annually. Their VP of Procurement, Sandra Holloway, had been working with me personally for 11 years. I remember the first crisis we solved together. 2013, a batch of their critical surgical supplies showed anomalous test results. Sandra was panicking, facing a potential recall that would have devastated their hospital contracts. I worked 72 hours straight, traced the issue to a calibration drift in our testing equipment, proved the product was actually within specification, and documented everything so thoroughly that FDA approved continued distribution within a week. Sandra sent me a handwritten thank you note that I still have in my desk. "You saved our company, Garrett. I won't forget." She meant it. When their orders had problems after that, I fixed them. When regulatory changes threatened their supply chain, I warned them months in advance. When Sandra's manufacturing team needed training on new FDA guidelines, I flew to their facility on my own time and taught them myself. That's not in any job description. That's relationship building that takes years. Morrison Healthcare was our third largest client, $8 million per year. David Chen, their quality director, started his career as an intern at Meridian under my supervision. I taught him everything he knew about pharmaceutical quality systems. Deviation investigations, root cause analysis, CAPA implementation. He'd call me on weekends with questions even years after he'd left for Morrison. I never minded. Watching someone I mentored succeed was its own reward. He'd told me repeatedly over the years that Morrison worked with Meridian specifically because of me. "Your name on the quality certificate means something, Garrett. It means I can trust what's in those bottles. Westfield Biotech, Patterson Medical, Concordia Pharmaceuticals. Every major client relationship at Meridian ran through my office. Not because I hoarded relationships, but because I was the one who actually solved their problems while executives like Douglas attended golf tournaments and strategy retreats. I never thought of these relationships as leverage. They were just the natural result of caring about your work and the people affected by it. But leverage is exactly what they became. My wife Rebecca died in 2013 from breast cancer. Emma was 7. For 8 years, I became both parents while maintaining a career that doesn't forgive mistakes. Missed school plays for deviation investigations. Missed science fairs for FDA inspections. Missed parent-teacher conferences because pharmaceutical quality runs around the clock. Emma learned independence earlier than she should have. By 15, she cooked her own meals, handled homework alone, pretended it didn't hurt that Dad was always at work. Last month, she asked why I worked so hard for a company that never promoted me past QC manager despite perfect compliance records. I told her it was about patient safety, loyalty, important work. She looked at me with her mother's eyes. Dad, they're using you? She was right. I just didn't want to see it until Tyler Brennan made it impossible to ignore. The promotion meeting happened on a Monday. I'd prepared comprehensive documentation showing 5 years of perfect performance, 0 FDA observations, 0 warning letters, $180 million saved in potential regulatory delays and recalls, 97% first-pass approval rate versus 73% industry average. Douglas flipped through my portfolio for maybe 3 minutes before closing it. Garrett, this is impressive historical data, but Tyler's bringing us into the future. AI for deviation trending, predictive analytics, the innovative thinking we need. Tyler leaned forward in his expensive suit, Rolex catching the light. I've studied your systems, Garrett. Pretty antiquated. Paper batch records? Manual entry? My Wharton thesis was on disrupting pharma quality with digital transformation. I looked at this kid who'd never worked a day in pharmaceutical manufacturing, never stayed until midnight fixing a critical deviation, never built a single relationship with a client or regulator. And I felt something I hadn't felt in 22 years at Meridian. Clarity. Where does this leave me? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Douglas shifted uncomfortably. We're creating a quality analytics specialist role reporting to Tyler. You'll transition your knowledge, then move into the new position. Same salary, of course. Train my replacement, take a subordinate role, report to someone who couldn't distinguish a laminar flow hood from a coffee maker. I stood up, shook Douglas's hand with the firm grip the Navy taught me, and said nothing. Just walked out of his office, past the QC labs I'd designed, past the clean rooms I'd certified, and straight to the parking garage. I sat in my truck for exactly 4 minutes. Not angry, thinking. Then I pulled out my personal phone and scrolled to a contact I'd saved 3 years ago but never called. Victoria Chen, CEO, Baxter Pharmaceuticals. She'd approached me at an industry conference in 2022. We need someone like you, Garrett. Name your terms when you're ready. At the time, I'd politely declined. Loyalty to Meridian, loyalty to Douglas, who I thought respected my work even if he didn't show it. Loyalty to 22 years of building something. I pressed call. Victoria answered on the second ring. Garrett Mitchell. I was starting to think you'd never use this number. I'm ready to talk, I said. She didn't waste time with small talk. Dinner tomorrow. I'll fly to Chicago. I agreed and hung up. Then I drove home at 5:30 p.m. for the first time in years. Emma was doing homework at the kitchen table when I walked in. Her face cycled through confusion, concern, then cautious hope. Dad, it's barely 6. Why are you home? Things are changing at work, I told her. Changing how? I sat down across from her, looked at my daughter who'd grown up mostly without me because I'd given everything to a company that just handed my career to someone's nephew. I'm leaving Meridian, taking a job with a competitor. Her eyes widened. But you've been there my whole life. Exactly. And they just showed me what that loyalty was worth to them. Nothing. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Good. Mom would have told you to leave years ago. Smart kid. She was absolutely right. Dinner with Victoria Chen happened at a quiet steakhouse where pharmaceutical executives didn't typically gather. She arrived alone, no lawyers, no HR representatives, just a CEO who knew exactly what she wanted. I've been watching Meridian's client retention numbers for years, she said after we'd ordered. Granite Medical, Morrison Healthcare, Westfield Biotech. Your name comes up in every industry conversation about why those relationships stay solid. I didn't respond, just waited. She continued. We both know those clients aren't loyal to Meridian. They're loyal to you. When you leave, some of them will follow, not because you'll recruit them, because they'll choose to follow someone they trust. She slid a folder across the table. Director of Quality and Regulatory Affairs. Direct report to me. 65% salary increase. Full authority to build your team however you want. I opened the folder, scanned the offer. It was everything I'd wanted from Meridian for a decade. Recognition, authority, compensation that matched responsibility. But I wanted to be clear about something. I won't actively recruit Meridian's clients. That's not who I am. Victoria smiled. I know. That's why I want you. You don't need to recruit anyone. When they find out where you've gone, the ones who matter will make their own decisions. I'm not going to poach your former employer's business. I'm going to give you the platform to be excellent and let excellence speak for itself. I signed the offer letter that night. The next morning, I walked into Douglas Brennan's office and placed my resignation letter on his desk. He looked at it like I'd handed him a live grenade. What is this? 2 weeks' notice. I've accepted a position elsewhere. Douglas's face went through several colors. Elsewhere? Where? That's not relevant to my transition responsibilities. I have documentation prepared for Tyler covering all active projects, client relationships, and regulatory matters. He stood up abruptly. Garrett, let's talk about this. Maybe I was hasty with the reorganization. We can discuss a different role, better compensation. I appreciated working here for 22 years, but I've made my decision. His voice got harder. You have a non-compete clause in your employment agreement. I do. It prohibits me from working for a direct competitor for 6 months after departure, but only if I receive severance equal to 6 months' salary. Since you're not offering severance, the clause is unenforceable. His face told me he hadn't actually read my employment agreement in years, or he'd forgotten that I'd negotiated that specific language back in 2018. Check with legal if you'd like, I said. But my last day is 2 weeks from today. I'll ensure a thorough transition. Word spread through Meridian within hours. By lunch, Patricia, my lead technician for 14 years, was at my desk with tears in her eyes. You're really leaving? Where are you going? Baxter Pharmaceuticals. Director of Quality. She stared at me for a long moment. They're lucky to get you. And honestly, good for you. By end of day, 6 members of my team had separately asked if Baxter was hiring. I told them all the same thing. I won't recruit you. But if you decide to apply on your own, I'd be happy to work with you again. Tyler Brennan made his first appearance in the QC department around 3 p.m., striding in with a leather portfolio and an expression of forced confidence. I heard you're leaving, he said, standing at my desk like he expected me to stand up. That's correct. I'll be documenting all ongoing projects and client relationships for the transition. He nodded, like this was his plan all along. That's fine. Fresh start for the department, anyway. Your methods were holding us back from real innovation. I looked at him. This kid who'd been handed my career because his uncle ran the company, who'd never earned a single relationship, never solved a single crisis, never built anything that would outlast his tenure. You have my documentation schedule, I said neutrally. Let me know if you have questions about any of the material. He walked away without responding. I went back to work preparing the most thorough transition documentation in pharmaceutical industry history. Not because I wanted Tyler to succeed, but because I wanted no one to ever say I'd been unprofessional on my way out. The phone calls started on day 3. Sandra Holloway from Granite Medical called my personal cell at 7 a.m. Garrett, I just heard you're leaving Meridian. Please tell me it's not true. It's true, Sandra. I'm joining Baxter Pharmaceuticals as their Director of Quality. There was a long pause. Garrett, you know I've told you this before. We work with Meridian because of you. Not because of their systems or their pricing or their brand. Because I trust you personally to make sure our products are safe and compliant. I appreciate that, Sandra, but I can't ask you to change suppliers because of me. That wouldn't be appropriate. I'm not asking you anything. I'm telling you. I'm going to have some conversations with my leadership team this week. Where you go matters to us. She hung up before I could respond. David Chen from Morrison Healthcare called an hour later. Almost identical conversation. Garrett, you personally trained me. You've been solving our problems for 8 years. Morrison doesn't have a relationship with Meridian. We have a relationship with you. By the end of my first week of notice, I'd received personal calls from procurement heads at 6 major Meridian clients. Not because I'd reached out to them, because the pharmaceutical industry is small, and word travels fast when someone with my reputation makes a move. Douglas called me into his office on day 8. He looked like he hadn't slept well. His desk was covered with papers, and his usually perfect hair was disheveled. Sit down, Garrett. I want to make you a counteroffer. I remained standing. I've already accepted Baxter's offer. Counteroffers aren't appropriate at this point. He stood up and walked around his desk, closer than professional distance usually allows. Director of Quality. 75% raise. Full authority over the department. Tyler reports to you instead of the other way around. Public acknowledgement that the reorganization was a mistake. I considered his face, the desperation there. The slowly dawning realization that 22 years of my work was about to walk out his door and might take significant revenue with it. What changed in the last 8 days? I asked. He didn't answer directly, just shifted uncomfortably. We've received some concerning calls from clients. I nodded. They're not calling because I asked them to. They're calling because they've realized something you never understood. Those relationships weren't company assets. They were my assets, built on my credibility, my expertise, my years of actually caring about their problems. You thought you could transfer that to your nephew with a 2-week transition plan. His face flushed. Garrett, I made a mistake. I'm admitting that. What more do you want? I wanted recognition for 22 years. You gave my job to Tyler. I wanted professional respect. You told me his MBA mattered more than my experience. I wanted to build something that would last. You showed me my entire career here was one nepotism decision away from irrelevance. I shook my head. What I want now is to start fresh somewhere that values what I bring. You had 22 years to recognize that. You chose your nephew. Douglas tried one more time. Name your price. Anything. I'm not for sale, Douglas. I never was. That was always the point. I walked out of his office for the last time. My final day at Meridian was quietly professional. I handed Tyler a complete documentation package covering every project, every client relationship, every regulatory contact, every process I'd managed for 22 years. He flipped through it with obvious disinterest, probably already planning how to digitally transform everything I'd built. Good luck, I told him. And I meant it, in a way. Not for his sake. For the sake of the employees who'd still be there when his inexperience caught up with him. Patricia walked me to the door. The whole QC team had gathered, not for a party, but just to be there. "We'll miss you," Patricia said, hugging me. "Some of these people might be reaching out to Baxter in the coming months, just so you know." I nodded. "If they do, I'll make sure they're treated fairly." I stepped through the doors of Meridian Pharmaceuticals for the last time. 22 years of work reduced to a cardboard box of personal items and a career's worth of knowledge that was about to become very valuable to their biggest competitor. I started at Baxter the following Monday. Victoria Chen had allocated significant resources for building out the quality department, and she meant it. Within my first month, I'd hired 3 senior quality managers from outside the industry and begun implementing the systematic improvements I'd always wanted to make at Meridian, but never had the authority to execute. The work was challenging, engaging, and respected. Everything Meridian should have been. The client calls started coming in week 2. Sandra Holloway was first. Garrett Granite Medical has completed our internal review. We're issuing an RFP for our pharmaceutical supply needs. Baxter is invited to bid. I'd like you to personally oversee our account if we transition." I understood what she was saying. An RFP was technically competitive, but Sandra was telling me Granite was ready to move. I passed the information to Baxter's sales team without personal involvement. The bid process needed to be clean. But I wasn't surprised when, 3 weeks later, Granite Medical announced they were transitioning their $15 million annual pharmaceutical contract from Meridian to Baxter. Douglas called me the day the announcement went public. His voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the panic underneath. "Did you recruit Sandra Holloway?" "No, she called me. Clients make their own decisions based on who they trust. You're destroying my company. I'm building a quality department at Baxter. What happens at Meridian isn't my concern anymore." He hung up without another word. David Chen from Morrison Healthcare made a similar call the following week. "We're restructuring our supplier relationships. Baxter's quality systems and your personal involvement make them our preferred partner going forward." Morrison's $8 million in annual business followed within 2 months. The announcement hit Meridian's stock price hard. Industry analysts started asking questions about client concentration risk and leadership stability. Tyler Brennan, still nominally running the QC department, issued a press release about digital transformation initiatives. Nobody was reassured. The dominoes kept falling. Westfield Biotech cited quality concerns with Meridian's new leadership and transitioned $5 million to Baxter. Their CEO, Margaret Williams, sent me a personal note. "We've worked with you for 9 years, Garrett. When you left, we started asking questions about who was actually running quality at Meridian. We didn't like the answers." Patterson Medical followed Granite's lead. Concordia Pharmaceuticals scheduled site visits to evaluate Baxter as a potential primary supplier. I never recruited a single client, never made a sales call, never disparaged Meridian or Tyler or Douglas. I just did excellent work at Baxter, and the clients I'd served for years made their own decisions about who they wanted to work with. Victoria Chen called me into her office after the Concordia site visit. "The business development team tells me we're on track to bring in over $35 million in new pharmaceutical contracts this year. Almost all of it from companies that used to work with Meridian." She wasn't gloating, just stating facts. "I didn't plan this," I said. "I know. That's what makes it powerful. You built something real over 22 years. Now everyone's seeing exactly what that's worth. Meanwhile, reports filtered back through industry channels about what was happening at Meridian. Tyler had tried to implement his AI-driven quality systems within weeks of my departure, causing confusion among the QC staff and triggering minor compliance issues that would have been easily prevented under experienced leadership. Patricia called me one evening, still at Meridian, but clearly on her way out. "It's chaos, Garrett. Tyler implemented a new electronic batch record system without adequate validation. We had 3 lots rejected by QC because nobody could figure out the new documentation requirements. He blamed the staff for not adapting fast enough." She paused. "He actually said our team was too set in your ways to embrace innovation." I didn't respond. What could I say? The FDA inspection that would have been routine became problematic when Tyler couldn't answer basic questions about process controls. Inspector Lansing led the audit. Patricia told me later that Lansing had asked specifically where I was within the first 5 minutes. When Tyler explained I'd left the company, Lansing's expression changed from professional to concerned. 483 observations. Not catastrophic, but damaging to a company already losing clients. The observations cited inadequate training documentation, incomplete deviation investigations, and a failure to maintain validated states for critical equipment. Issues I would have caught and resolved in days. Issues that Tyler probably didn't even understand. The industry trade publications picked up the story. Meridian Pharmaceuticals faces regulatory scrutiny amid leadership changes, client departures. Douglas's name wasn't mentioned, but everyone in the industry knew whose decisions had led to this point. By month 4, 5 members of my former QC team had applied to Baxter. I hired 3 of them, including Patricia, who became my lead technical advisor. The others I helped place at companies where they'd thrive, even competitors. My job wasn't to strip Meridian of all talent, just to build the best team I could. Patricia's first day at Baxter, she sat in my office with tears in her eyes. I never realized how much I was carrying at Meridian until I put it down. You built a system there that worked despite the leadership, not because of it. When you left, there was nothing holding it together. She shook her head. Tyler still thinks the problems are everyone else's fault. He'll learn, I said. Or he won't. Either way, it's not our problem anymore. The industry conference in month 6 is where everything came to a head. Annual Pharmaceutical Quality Summit in San Diego. Every major player in the industry attends. I was presenting on Baxter's new predictive quality systems, ironically the kind of innovation Tyler had promised but never delivered. Victoria Chen introduced me to the audience of 400 industry professionals as one of the most respected quality leaders in pharmaceutical manufacturing. I spotted Douglas Brennan in the 3rd row. He looked older than he had 6 months ago. Tired. Tyler wasn't with him. After my presentation, which received strong applause and led to 3 new client inquiries for Baxter, Douglas approached me in the hallway. "Got a minute?" We stepped into an empty breakout room. He didn't sit down. "You've cost me over $40 million in client revenue." I corrected him. Clients made their own decisions based on their assessment of quality leadership. I didn't recruit anyone. His jaw tightened. "The board is forcing me to sell Meridian. We can't sustain operations after losing Granite and Morrison. Westfield is leaving next quarter. I'm going to lose everything my family built over 35 years. I considered his words carefully. What happened to Tyler? Douglas's expression flickered with something like shame. He resigned after the FDA observations. Actually, the board asked for his resignation. He's applying to business school. Thinks he wants to teach. I thought about saying something cutting. Something about how 22 years of my loyalty meant nothing until it walked out the door. Something about how his nephew's fresh perspectives had cost him his company. Instead, I said something I actually meant. I'm sorry it ended this way, Douglas. Not for the business outcome. For you personally. You made decisions based on family loyalty instead of professional judgment. That's understandable, even if it was wrong. But I didn't do this to hurt you. I did it to stop hurting myself. He stared at me for a long moment. You could have stayed. We could have worked something out. You could have recognized my value any time in the past decade. You chose not to until it was too late. That's not my failure. That's yours. He left without shaking my hand. 3 months later, Meridian Pharmaceuticals was acquired by a private equity firm for roughly 40% of its peak valuation. Douglas Brennan retired from the industry entirely. Most of the remaining employees were offered positions with the acquiring company or transitioned to other firms, several of them landing at Baxter through standard recruitment channels. The evening after the Meridian acquisition was announced, I came home at 6 p.m. like I did every night now. Emma was at the kitchen table, not with homework this time, but with college brochures spread across the surface. She was looking at pre-med programs. "Dad," she said as I set down my briefcase, "I've been thinking about what I want to do. I want to go into healthcare, maybe pharmaceutical research, something that helps people like you do." I sat down across from her, looking at my daughter who'd grown up so much in the past year, who'd watched her father finally choose himself over misplaced loyalty. "What made you interested in that?" "You," she said simply. "Watching you these past 6 months. You're happier, you're home, but you're also still doing important work, helping make sure medicines are safe. I want to do something that matters like that." I didn't have words for a moment, just sat there looking at this remarkable young woman who'd lost her mother, raised herself through her father's workaholism, and somehow emerged with compassion and purpose intact. "I'm proud of you," I finally said. "Whatever you choose." She smiled her mother's smile. "I know. I'm proud of you too." At Baxter, the quality department I built became an industry model. We achieved 0 FDA observations in our first full year under my leadership, matching my record at Meridian. More importantly, we built systems that didn't depend on any single person's institutional knowledge. Cross-training programs, documented relationships, succession planning. Everything I'd wanted to implement at Meridian, but never had the authority to execute. Victoria Chen promoted me to VP of Quality and Regulatory Affairs in year 2. Patricia became Director of Quality Operations. 2 other former Meridian employees rose to senior positions. We built something sustainable, something that would outlast any individual contributor, including me. The irony wasn't lost on me. Douglas had wanted fresh perspectives and modern approaches. What he got was his nephew's failure. What I built at Baxter was actually innovative, actually modern, actually the future of pharmaceutical quality management. But it was built on a foundation of experience and relationships that took decades to develop. You can't shortcut that with an MBA and buzzwords. I ran into Tyler Brennan once more, about 2 years after leaving Meridian. He was working as an operations analyst at a small manufacturing company in Ohio, nothing to do with pharmaceuticals. We happened to be at the same coffee shop in Chicago when he was visiting family. "Mr. Mitchell," he said, approaching my table with obvious hesitation. I wasn't sure whether to say hello. I gestured to the empty chair. "Sit down if you want." He sat, looking uncomfortable in a way that had nothing to do with the chair. "I owe you an apology," he said. I was arrogant. "I thought I understood your job because I understood the theory. I didn't understand anything. What happened after I left? Not the business stuff. I mean for you." Tyler stared at his coffee. "I spent 6 months blaming everyone else. You, my uncle, the FDA, the clients who left. Then I worked at a warehouse for a while. Manual labor. Learned what it actually feels like to do work that matters every day, even if no one notices. I nodded. That's valuable. More valuable than most MBA coursework. What's next? I'm going back to school. Not for business, engineering. I want to actually understand how things work instead of just managing people who do. I looked at this kid who'd cost me my career at Meridian, who'd triggered a chain of events that destroyed his uncle's company, who'd learned exactly nothing from his Wharton education until failure taught him what business school couldn't. Good luck, I said. And I meant it. Not because I'd forgiven the arrogance that cost me 22 years of work, but because watching someone learn humility the hard way is its own kind of resolution. He'd never be my friend. But he might eventually become a competent professional, and that was better than the alternative. The best revenge isn't destruction, I've learned. It's building something better while the people who dismissed you watch from the sidelines. Douglas Brennan lost his company because he couldn't tell the difference between credentials and competence. Tyler Brennan lost his fast-track career because he couldn't tell the difference between theory and experience. I didn't make them fail. I just stopped making them succeed. And then I went somewhere that actually valued what I'd spent a lifetime building. Emma graduated high school last spring. Valedictorian, early admission to Johns Hopkins pre-med program. In her graduation speech, she talked about watching her father choose self-respect over misplaced loyalty, about learning that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people who don't value you and toward people who do. I sat in the audience with tears running down my face, not caring who saw. After the ceremony, she found me in the crowd. "Dad," she said, hugging me tight. "Thanks for finally coming home." "I've been home for 2 years now," I told her. "No," she said. "You came home when you left Meridian. Everything since then has just been proving you made the right choice." Smart kid. She was absolutely right. If you've ever felt trapped by loyalty to people who don't deserve it, remember this. Your value doesn't disappear when you walk away. It follows you. The relationships you build, the expertise you develop, the reputation you earn. Those are yours. Not your company's. Not your boss's. Yours. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is prove exactly what they're losing by taking it somewhere that actually appreciates it. You don't have to burn bridges or sabotage anyone. You just have to be excellent somewhere else and let the results speak for themselves. Subscribe for more stories about what happens when people finally stop accepting less than their worth. The companies that lose them always seem surprised. The people who leave never are.